The black stallion reared up with such violence that Zachary Brennan thought for sure this time someone would die. Hooves slashing the air like weapons forged in hell itself. And the ranch hand hit the dirt so hard, the breath left his body in a sound that made everyone watching wince. It was May of 1878, and the sun beat down on the Circle O Ranch outside Galesburg, Illinois, with the kind of persistent heat that made even the hardiest men dream of shade and cold water. Zachary stood at the fence line, her worn leather boots planted in the dusty earth, watching the 9th attempt in as many days to break the wild stallion that had arrived 3 weeks prior with a herd purchased from a dealer passing through town. The animal was magnificent, coal-black except for a white star on his forehead, standing 16 hands high with muscles that rippled like water under his glossy coat. He was also utterly untamable, or so it seemed. The ranch hand, a burly man named Pete with arms thick as fence posts, rolled away from the stallion's hooves and scrambled to safety while 2 other men rushed in to distract the horse. Pete's hat lay trampled in the corral, crushed beyond recognition. That made 9 men thrown, 9 men who had climbed onto that stallion's back with confidence and landed in the dirt with nothing but bruises and damaged pride to show for their efforts. Zachary had been watching every attempt. At 22 years old, she had spent her entire life around horses, first on her father's small farm in Ohio, before fever took both her parents when she was 18. Then working her way west doing whatever job she could find until she landed in Galesburg 6 months ago. She had talked her way into a job at the Circle O doing laundry and cooking for the ranch hands, but her real passion had always been horses. She understood them in a way that seemed to elude most people, could read their moods and movements like some people read books. And she had been studying this stallion with intense fascination. The ranch owner, old Thomas O'Brien, stood near the corral gate shaking his head. He was a weathered man in his 60s with a white beard and eyes that had seen too many hard winters. "That devil horse is going to kill someone," he muttered to his foreman. "Maybe we should just cut our losses and sell him for dog food." "Give me 1 more day with him," said a voice that made Zachary's pulse quicken despite herself. Flynn O'Brien stepped forward from where he had been leaning against the barn, and Zachary felt that same flutter in her chest that she experienced every time she saw him. Flynn was Thomas's grandson, 25 years old, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of summer grass. He had arrived at the ranch 2 months ago from Wyoming, where he had been working on his own spread until a drought forced him to sell out and come back to help his grandfather. Flynn had a reputation as the best horseman in 3 counties, a man who could gentle any animal with patience and skill. But even he had been studying the black stallion from a distance, not yet making an attempt to ride him. "You think you can do what 9 good men could not?" Thomas asked, though there was hope in his voice. "I think I have been watching him, learning him," Flynn said quietly. "That horse is not mean. He is scared and angry and does not trust humans. Someone hurt him bad before we got him. You can see it in how he moves, how he watches us like we are all about to strike him." Zachary found herself nodding, even though no one was looking at her. That was exactly what she had observed. The stallion's aggression came from a place of deep fear, from wounds that were not visible on his body but lived somewhere in his spirit. "Tomorrow morning then," Thomas said. "But Flynn, I will not have you getting yourself killed over a horse. If it looks too dangerous, we stop. Understood?" Flynn nodded, but Zachary could see the determination in the set of his jaw. He would not give up easily. It was one of the things she had come to admire about him during her months at the ranch, watching him from a distance. never quite finding the courage to speak to him beyond polite greetings and necessary exchanges about meals and schedules. The men dispersed as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, and Zachary found herself lingering at the fence. The stallion had retreated to the far side of the corral, his sides still heaving from the exertion of throwing peat. She could see the whites of his eyes, the way he held his head high and alert, ready for the next attack. "You are scared," she whispered. "I understand. I have been scared too." The horse's ears swiveled toward her voice, though he did not approach. Zachary had learned early on not to try to get close to him. He tolerated no one, struck out at anyone who came within reach. But she could talk to him from here, let him hear a voice that held no threat, no demand. She did not notice Flynn approaching until he was standing beside her at the fence. She startled slightly, her breath catching. "Sorry, did not mean to sneak up on you," he said, offering a small smile. "I have seen you out here watching. Every time we try to break him, you are here." Zachary felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. "I suppose I should be working instead of watching," she said, expecting criticism. But Flynn shook his head. "What do you see when you look at him?" The question surprised her. Men rarely asked her opinion about anything, let alone something as important as horses. She considered her answer carefully. "I see an animal that has been broken by cruelty and will never submit to force. Every man who climbs on his back is just proving to him that humans are the enemy. He throws them because he is fighting for his life." Flynn was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the stallion. "That is exactly what I see too," he said finally. "My grandfather wants me to ride him tomorrow, but I do not think that is the answer. I think this horse needs something different." "What?" Zachary asked, genuinely curious. "I am not sure yet," Flynn admitted, "but I have been thinking about it. Sometimes with horses like this, you have to let them come to you instead of forcing yourself on them. You have to show them that you are not a threat." The stallion snorted and pawed the ground, watching them with those dark, suspicious eyes. Zachary felt a kinship with the animal that she could not quite explain. She too had learned to be wary of trusting people, had learned that the world could be cruel and unpredictable. "Will you be here tomorrow, watching?" Flynn asked. "If you want me to be," Zachary said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I would like that," Flynn said, and when he looked at her, really looked at her, Zachary felt something shift in her chest. "You see things others miss. I think maybe you could help me understand him better." No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She had always been dismissed, told to stick to women's work, to leave the important matters to men. But here was Flynn O'Brien, the best horseman she had ever seen, asking for her opinion. "I will be here," she promised. That night, Zachary lay in her small room in the bunkhouse annex where the cook and housekeeper slept, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Flynn's green eyes and the way he had looked at the stallion with understanding rather than anger. She thought about the horse too, wild and hurt and fighting against a world that seemed determined to break him. She must have eventually slept, because she woke to the pre-dawn light filtering through her window. She dressed quickly in her simple cotton dress and apron, knowing she would need to prepare breakfast for the ranch hands before she could go watch Flynn work with the stallion. Her hands moved through the familiar motions of stoking the fire, mixing biscuit dough, frying bacon and eggs, brewing coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The men filed in as the sun rose, eating quickly and talking about the day's work ahead. Flynn came in last, and Zachary felt his presence like a physical thing. He caught her eye and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of what was to come. She served him his breakfast and watched as he ate slowly, methodically, like a man preparing for battle. When the meal was done and the dishes cleared, Zachary wiped her hands on her apron and walked out to the corral. Several of the ranch hands had gathered to watch, curiosity and skepticism written on their faces. Thomas stood near the gate, looking worried. Flynn entered the corral alone, carrying nothing but a long lead rope coiled in his hand. The stallion immediately tensed, moving to the far side of the enclosure. For a long moment, Flynn just stood there, making no move toward the horse. He simply existed in the same space, breathing, waiting. The horse pawed the ground, snorted, tossed his magnificent head. Flynn remained still. 5 minutes passed. 10. The other men began to shift restlessly, muttering among themselves. What was Flynn doing? Why was he not trying to approach the animal? But Zachary understood. She watched Flynn's careful stillness, the way he was letting the horse take the measure of him without pressure, without threat. It was a kind of conversation without words, a slow negotiation. After 15 minutes, the stallion took a single step toward Flynn. It was barely perceptible, but Zachary saw it, and she knew Flynn did too, though he gave no sign. He remained motionless, patient. Another 5 minutes and the horse took another step. His ears were forward now, curiosity beginning to overcome fear. What was this human who made no demands, offered no violence? The sun climbed higher. Sweat began to darken Flynn's shirt, but still he stood. And slowly, incrementally, the stallion moved closer. It took over an hour, but eventually the horse stood within 10 feet of Flynn, his nostrils flaring as he tried to catch the man's scent. Flynn began to speak, his voice so low Zachary could barely hear it. "That is right. I am not going to hurt you. I am just being here with you." The stallion's ears twitched, listening. Another step closer. "Someone hurt you bad, did they not? Made you think all humans are cruel, but I am not that person. I am just Flynn, and I want to understand you." Zachary felt tears prick her eyes at the gentleness in his voice. This was so different from the rough, breaking methods she had seen other men use, all force and dominance and broken spirits. The horse took another step, and now he was close enough that Flynn could have reached out and touched him. But Flynn did not move, did not extend his hand, did not push for more than the stallion was ready to give. "You are safe with me," Flynn murmured. "I promise you that." The stallion lowered his head slightly, a small gesture but significant. Some of the tension seemed to drain from his body. They stood like that, man and horse, for another long stretch of time. Then Flynn very slowly lifted his hand, extending it palm out toward the stallion. The horse's eyes went wide. He backed up several steps, snorting, but Flynn did not pursue. He simply held his hand out, an offering, not a demand. "Your choice," Flynn said. "Always your choice." Zachary realized she was holding her breath. The ranch hands had gone completely silent, watching this strange dance between man and beast. The stallion stood still for a full minute, considering. Then, with aching slowness, he extended his neck and took a step forward. His nose came closer to Flynn's hand, close enough to feel the warmth of the man's skin. He snorted, blowing hot breath across Flynn's palm. Flynn did not move to touch him. He let the horse investigate, let him decide the pace of this interaction. Finally, the stallion's velvet nose touched Flynn's hand. It was the briefest contact, barely there, but it meant everything. The horse had chosen to trust, if only for a moment. A smile spread across Flynn's face, small but genuine. "Thank you," he whispered. "That is a good start." He slowly lowered his hand and took a step back, giving the horse space. The stallion watched him but did not retreat. Something had shifted between them. Flynn walked calmly to the gate and let himself out. The gathered men erupted in exclamations and questions, but Flynn just shook his head. "That is enough for today," he said. "We made contact. That is more than we have had before." Thomas looked amazed. "You did not even try to get a halter on him." "Not today," Flynn said. Today was about showing him I can be trusted. The rest will come in time. His eyes found Zachary's across the crowd, and he walked over to her. What did you think? I think you gave him something no one else has, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. You gave him a choice. Flynn's smile deepened. Will you come watch again tomorrow? I would value your observations. Of course, Zachary said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. Over the next week, Zachary watched Flynn work with the stallion every morning. Each day the horse allowed him a little closer, tolerated a little more. By the third day, Flynn was able to stroke the stallion's neck. By the fifth day, he had a halter on him. By the seventh day, the horse was following Flynn around the corral like a devoted dog. His fierce aggression transformed into cautious affection. And every day, after the session was done, Flynn would come find Zachary and ask what she had observed. They would talk for long stretches, discussing the horse's body language, his reactions, what Flynn might try next. But gradually, their conversations expanded beyond the stallion. Flynn asked about her life, where she came from, how she had ended up at the Circle O. She told him about her parents, about learning to love horses on her father's small farm, about the loneliness of the years after they died. Flynn shared his own stories too. He spoke of growing up on his grandfather's ranch, of his dreams of having his own spread, of the heartbreak of losing it to drought and having to start over. He talked about his love of horses, how he had always felt more comfortable with animals than with most people. They do not judge, he said one evening as they sat on the fence watching the stallion graze peacefully in the corral. They do not care about money or status or any of the things people seem to value. They just want to be understood and treated kindly. I feel the same way, Zachary admitted. I have always been more at ease in a barn than in a parlor. Flynn looked at her with something warm in his eyes. That is because you have a gift with them. I have watched you around the other horses, how you move with them, how they respond to you. You have the same instincts I do. Zachary felt her cheeks flush with pleasure at the compliment. My father used to say I was part horse myself, the way I could communicate with them. He sounds like he was a wise man. He was, Zachary said softly. I miss him every day. Flynn reached over and covered her hand with his where it rested on the fence rail. The touch sent electricity through her entire body. I am glad you are here, he said quietly. Glad I got to know you. I am glad too, Zachary whispered. They sat like that as the sun set, hands touching, watching the horse that had brought them together. Zachary felt something blooming in her chest, warm and terrifying and wonderful all at once. She was falling in love with Flynn O'Brien, and she hoped, that maybe he was falling for her too. 2 weeks after Flynn's first session with the stallion, he decided it was time to attempt riding him. The entire ranch turned out to watch, remembering the violent throes of weeks past and curious to see if Flynn's patient methods had truly changed the wild horse. Zachary stood at her usual spot by the fence, her heart in her throat. She trusted Flynn's skill and judgment, but she also knew that horses could be unpredictable, that even the best horsemen could get hurt. Flynn entered the corral, and the stallion immediately came to him, nickering softly. It was a remarkable transformation. The animal that had been a whirlwind of rage and fear now greeted Flynn with affection, nudging at his shoulder and allowing himself to be stroked. Flynn talked to the horse in that low, gentle voice as he checked the saddle's cinch, making sure everything was secure. We are going to try something today, he said. I am going to sit on your back. If you do not like it, if it scares you, that is all right, but I hope you will trust me enough to let me try. He placed his foot in the stirrup and paused, giving the stallion time to react. The horse shifted slightly but did not move away. Flynn slowly swung himself up into the saddle. For a moment, everyone held their breath. The stallion stood absolutely still, his ears swiveling back toward Flynn. Zachary could see the tension in the horse's body, the uncertainty. This was the moment where every other rider had been thrown, but Flynn did not try to control him, did not grab the reins and kick his sides. He simply sat there, his weight settling gently, his hand stroking the stallion's neck. "You are all right," he murmured. "I am not going to hurt you. We are partners, you and I." The stallion took a tentative step forward, then another. He walked a slow circuit of the corral, Flynn sitting easy in the saddle, letting the horse set the pace. There was no bucking, no rearing, no violence, just a horse and rider moving together. A cheer went up from the watching ranch hands, but Flynn raised a hand for quiet. Too much noise might spook the stallion. He rode for another 10 minutes, asking for nothing more than walking, praising the horse constantly. Then he dismounted and removed the saddle, rewarding the stallion with apples from his pocket and words of affection. When Flynn emerged from the corral, Thomas clasped him on the shoulder, beaming with pride. "You did it, boy. You broke the unbreakable horse." But Flynn shook his head. "I did not break him, grandfather. Breaking is what they tried before, and it failed. I gentled him. I earned his trust. There is a difference." His eyes sought Zachary's, and she felt her heart swell. She met him at the edge of the crowd, and without thinking about propriety or who might see, she reached for his hand. "That was beautiful," she said. "You gave him his spirit back instead of crushing it." Flynn squeezed her hand. "I could not have done it without you. Watching you watch him, hearing your insights, it helped me understand what he needed." "What will you call him?" Zachary asked. Flynn considered, looking back at the stallion who stood calmly in the corral. "Shadow," he said, "because he has come out of darkness into light." It was a perfect name. Zachary smiled and Flynn smiled back, and in that moment she knew without question that she loved him, loved this man who saw strength in gentleness and understood that trust had to be earned, not forced. That evening, after supper was done and the dishes washed, Flynn found Zachary on the porch of the main house where she sometimes sat to watch the stars emerge. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I have been thinking," he said, his voice slightly uncertain in a way she had never heard before, "about the future, about what I want." Zachary's pulse quickened. "What do you want?" "I want my own ranch again," Flynn said. "A place where I can raise horses the way they should be raised, with patience and respect. A place where I can build something lasting." "That sounds wonderful," Zachary said, though her heart was sinking. Was he telling her he was leaving? "But I do not want to do it alone," Flynn continued. He turned to look at her, and in the fading light his eyes were intense. "Zachary, these past weeks getting to know you, watching you with the horses, talking with you, it has made me realize something. You are the partner I have been looking for, not just in work but in life." Zachary could hardly breathe. "Flynn, I know it is fast," he said quickly. "I know we have only really known each other a short time, but some things you just know in your bones are right. The way you understood Shadow, the way you see the world, the way you make me want to be better. I love you, Zachary. I am in love with you, and I want to build that future with you by my side if you will have me." Tears spilled down Zachary's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too," she said, her voice breaking. "I have loved you since I first watched you stand in that corral and choose patience over force. Since you asked for my opinion and actually listened. Since you showed me what it means to be truly seen." Flynn reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "Is that a yes then?" "Yes," Zachary said, laughing through her tears. "Yes to everything. Yes to the future. Yes to the ranch. Yes to you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Zachary melted into him, feeling like she had finally found her home, not in a place but in a person who understood her soul. When they pulled apart, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "We will need to save money, work hard. It might take a few years to have enough to buy our own land." "I do not care how long it takes," Zachary said. "As long as we are together." They sat on that porch until the stars filled the sky, talking about their dreams, making plans, stealing kisses between words. Zachary had never imagined she could feel this happy, this hopeful about the future. The next morning, Flynn told his grandfather about their plans to marry. Thomas's weathered face broke into a wide smile. "About time," he said gruffly. "I have seen the way you two look at each other. Thought you were both going to dance around it forever." "You do not mind that I want to start my own place eventually?" Flynn asked. Thomas shook his head. "Boy, I want you to have your own legacy. This ranch will be here, and I have other family who can help run it. You need to chase your dreams, and I am glad you found someone to chase them with." They were married in Galesburg's small church on a warm day in late June, with the ranch hands and townspeople filling the pews. Zachary wore a simple white dress that Thomas's wife had worn 40 years before, altered to fit her smaller frame. Flynn wore his best suit, though he looked slightly uncomfortable in the formal attire. But when Zachary walked down the aisle toward him, the look in his eyes made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. They moved into one of the small cabins on the ranch property, a cozy 2-room building that they filled with warmth and love. Zachary continued helping in the kitchen, but now she also worked alongside Flynn with the horses. He taught her everything he knew, and she absorbed it like parched earth soaking up rain. Together, they trained Shadow to be the finest saddle horse in the county, and word began to spread about their gentle methods and the remarkable results they achieved. Other ranchers started bringing them problem horses, animals that had been deemed unmanageable or dangerous. Flynn and Zachary would work with them, always together now, employing the same patience and understanding they had used with Shadow. And horse after horse, they proved that violence and force were not necessary, that trust and respect could accomplish what breaking never could. As they worked, they saved every penny they could. Zachary took in mending and laundry from townspeople. Flynn did extra work for neighboring ranches. Every dollar went into the jar they kept hidden under a floorboard in their cabin, their dream fund slowly growing. In the spring of 1880, Zachary discovered she was pregnant. She told Flynn one evening after supper, watching nervously for his reaction. They had not specifically planned for a child yet, too focused on saving for their ranch, but Flynn's face lit up with pure joy. He swept her into his arms, careful even in his excitement. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Zachary asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy. Zachary, I am beyond happy. You have given me everything, love and partnership and purpose, and now you are giving me a family. How could I be anything but overjoyed?" Their son was born in December of that year, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes. They named him Samuel Thomas, after Zachary's father and Flynn's grandfather. Holding that tiny life in her arms, Zachary felt a completeness she had never known was possible. Thomas O'Brien doted on his great-grandson, declaring that the boy would surely be the finest horseman the county had ever seen when he grew up. But he also did something unexpected. On Samuel's first birthday, he called Flynn and Zachary to his office and handed Flynn a deed. "That property on the eastern edge of my land, the 200 acres by Clear Creek," Thomas said. "It is yours now. Your wedding gift, though I am giving it to you late. Build your ranch there. Stay close to family." Flynn stared at the document, his throat working. "Grandfather, this is too much." "Nonsense," Thomas said gruffly. "You have earned it 10 times over with the work you have done here, and I want my great-grandson growing up where I can spoil him rotten. Take the land, Flynn. Build your dream." Zachary felt tears streaming down her face as Flynn embraced his grandfather. This generous gift meant they could start their ranch years earlier than planned, meant their dream was suddenly within reach. They spent the next year building. Flynn and several ranch hands constructed a barn, a corral, a small house near the creek. It was not fancy, but it was solid and well made, with windows that let in the sunlight and a fireplace to keep them warm in winter. Zachary worked alongside the men when she could, and when she could not because Samuel needed her. She planned the layout of their future training facilities and started spreading word that they would soon be open for business. In the spring of 1882, they officially opened the O'Brien Horse Training Ranch. Their reputation had preceded them, and within weeks they had 3 horses in training, then 5, then 8. Zachary proved to have just as much skill as Flynn at working with difficult animals. She had learned not just his techniques, but had developed her own instincts, her own methods that complemented his perfectly. They made a remarkable team. Flynn would often handle the initial work with a new horse, establishing that first crucial trust. Then Zachary would work with the animal on gentling and specific training. They consulted constantly, shared observations, built on each other's strengths. Owners who came to collect their transformed horses marveled at the change, at animals that had been vicious or unmanageable now responding with calm obedience. Shadow remained Flynn's personal mount, a living testament to their philosophy. The stallion who had thrown every hand on the circle, was now the gentlest, most responsive horse imaginable, so well trained that Flynn could guide him with the slightest pressure of his knees, barely needing the reins at all. As their reputation grew, so did their ranch. They bought adjacent land, expanded their facilities, hired 2 young men to help with the daily work. Money was not plentiful, but it was enough. More importantly, they had built something meaningful together, a place where horses were treated with dignity, and where their methods were proving that there was a better way than the brutal breaking techniques so common in the West. In 1884, Zachary gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose Elizabeth. She was a tiny, delicate thing, but with a will of iron from the moment she entered the world. Samuel, now 4 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. Flynn was a devoted father, spending hours playing with the children when work allowed, telling them stories, teaching Samuel about horses with infinite patience. Watching him with their children, Zachary fell in love with him all over again, seeing new depths to the man she had married. Life settled into a rhythm that was challenging but deeply satisfying. Mornings began before dawn, with horses to feed and train. Zachary would work with the animals while also managing the household and caring for the children, a juggling act that left her exhausted most nights, but also fulfilled. Flynn handled the business side of things along with his training work, meeting with clients, managing the ranch hands, maintaining the facilities. But they always made time for each other. After the children were asleep, they would sit together on the porch of their house, watching the stars just as they had that night when Flynn first told her he loved her. They would talk about the day's challenges and victories, make plans for the future, share their thoughts and dreams. And sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, content in the simple presence of each other. One evening in the summer of 1886, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was a well-dressed man in his 50s, riding a fine bay gelding and leading a horse trailer behind him. Flynn went out to meet him while Zachary watched from the porch, 6-year-old Samuel at her side and 2-year-old Rose playing with wooden blocks at her feet. The man introduced himself as Richard Montgomery, a wealthy horse breeder from Kentucky. "I have heard about your methods," he said. "How you gentled that black stallion that no one else could ride. How you turn vicious horses into gentle ones without breaking their spirits." "We do our best," Flynn said modestly. "What can we help you with, Mr. Montgomery?" Montgomery gestured to his trailer. "I have a mare in here, a thoroughbred with exceptional bloodlines. She was traumatized during a fire at my stables 2 years ago. Since then, she has been unrideable, barely approachable. I have had 5 different trainers try to work with her, all using the best methods known in Kentucky. But she has only gotten worse. I heard about you and I thought perhaps, as a last resort before I have to put her down, you might be willing to try." Flynn's expression grew serious. "Put her down? Surely there are other options." "Not if she cannot be ridden or bred," Montgomery said heavily. "I cannot keep feeding and housing a horse that serves no purpose. It is not economical, but I thought if anyone could help her, it might be you." Flynn looked at Zachary, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded. They had never turned away a horse in need, no matter how challenging. "We will take her," Flynn said. "But Mr. Montgomery, you should know that we cannot promise results. Every horse is different. If her trauma is too deep, there may be limits to what we can accomplish." "I understand," Montgomery said. "I just want to know I tried everything before making the final decision." They unloaded the mare, and Zachary's heart broke at the sight of her. She was a beautiful animal, chestnut with a white blaze, with the refined features and long legs of quality breeding. But her eyes were wild with terror, and her body bore scars from the fire, patches where the hair had grown back differently colored. She was trembling, her sides heaving, clearly in distress just from the journey. They settled her in a private corral away from the other horses, gave her feed and water, and left her alone to decompress. Montgomery stayed in town overnight, saying he would return in a few days to check on progress. That night, Flynn and Zachary lay in bed discussing the new arrival. "She is severely traumatized," Zachary said quietly. "More than any horse we have worked with before." "I know," Flynn said, his arm around her shoulders, "but we have to try. I cannot stand the thought of her being destroyed just because she is hurt and scared." "We will help her," Zachary said with determination. "Just like we helped Shadow, we will show her that humans can be kind." Over the next weeks they worked with the mare, who they started calling Flame because of her coloring and her history. It was slow, painstaking work. The horse was so fearful that even approaching her corral would send her into a panic. They started by just being near her, sitting outside her enclosure, letting her get used to their presence without pressure. Zachary spent hours singing to Flame, her voice soft and melodic. She sang old ballads her mother had taught her, songs about love and loss and hope. Gradually, over days and then weeks, Flame began to relax slightly when she heard Zachary's voice. The wild panic in her eyes eased just a fraction. Flynn worked on building trust through feeding, always placing Flame's grain in the same spot, always moving slowly and predictably. He talked to her constantly, his voice that same gentle tone he had used with Shadow. Samuel and Rose were fascinated by the new horse. Zachary had to constantly remind Samuel not to get too close, that Flame needed space and quiet. But the boy was patient beyond his years, content to watch from a distance and whisper encouragement to the frightened mare. Richard Montgomery returned twice to check on progress. The first time, after 2 weeks, there was little visible change. Flame was still skittish, still unreachable. Montgomery's expression was disappointed but not surprised. "I will give you 1 more month," he said. "Then I need to make a decision. The second visit, 4 weeks later, showed more promise. Flame was allowing Flynn and Zachary to be in the corral with her, though she kept her distance. She had stopped the constant trembling and was eating more regularly. Montgomery looked hopeful but cautious. "You have made more progress than anyone else," he admitted, "but can she ever be ridden again? That is what I need to know." "We are not there yet," Flynn said honestly, "but we are not giving up." After Montgomery left, Flynn and Zachary redoubled their efforts. Zachary started spending entire afternoons in the corral with Flame, just sitting and talking and singing. Sometimes she brought her mending and would work on it while chatting to the horse about daily ranch life, the children's antics, the weather, anything that came to mind. Slowly, infinitesimally, Flame began to approach. First just a few steps closer while Zachary sat still, then close enough to sniff her. Finally, one miraculous afternoon in early autumn, Flame walked right up to Zachary and lowered her head, allowing herself to be touched for the first time since arriving at the ranch. Zachary felt tears stream down her face as she gently stroked the mare's scarred neck. "You are so brave," she whispered. "So very brave to trust again after what you went through." Flynn, watching from outside the corral, had tears in his own eyes. When Zachary emerged, he pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "You did it," he said. "You reached her." "We did it," Zachary corrected. "We are a team, remember." From that breakthrough, progress accelerated. Within 2 weeks, Flame was allowing both Flynn and Zachary to handle her, to brush her, to check her hooves. The wild fear in her eyes had been replaced by cautious trust. She was never going to be an easy horse, would always carry the scars of her trauma, but she was healing. When they finally introduced a saddle, they did it gradually, first just laying a blanket over her back, then the saddle pad, then finally the saddle itself. Flame tensed but did not panic. Flynn mounted her with Zachary at her head, ready to calm her if needed. The mare stood absolutely still, quivering slightly but not bucking or trying to throw him. They kept that first ride to less than 5 minutes, just walking around the corral. But it was enough. Flame could be ridden again. Montgomery arrived for his final visit in October, prepared to see little change and make his difficult decision. Instead, he watched in amazement as Flynn rode Flame around the training ring, the mare responding calmly to his directions. "I cannot believe it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I truly cannot believe you saved her." "She saved herself," Zachary said. "She chose to trust again. We just gave her the space and time to make that choice." Montgomery paid them triple their normal fee and offered them a business proposition. "I want to send you more horses," he said. "Problem cases that other trainers have given up on. I will pay your fees plus transportation costs. You two have a gift, and the equine world needs to know about it." Flynn and Zachary accepted, and true to his word, Montgomery became one of their most valuable advocates. He sent horses to them and told other wealthy breeders about their methods. Soon they were receiving inquiries from as far away as Texas and Colorado, from people who had horses they loved but could not manage and were desperate for help. Their ranch expanded again. They built more corrals, hired more help, established a reputation that spread throughout the West. But even with success, they never forgot their principles. Every horse was treated with patience and respect. Every animal was given the time they needed to heal and learn. Flynn and Zachary never used force or cruelty, never prioritized speed over the horse's well-being. The years rolled by in a blur of work and family and love. Samuel grew into a lanky boy who had his father's way with horses and his mother's quiet observation skills. Rose was a whirlwind of energy and determination, insisting on helping with the horses even when she was so small she had to stand on a stool to brush their flanks. In 1889, Zachary gave birth to their third child, another son they named Henry James. He was a peaceful baby, content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes. Thomas O'Brien, now in his 70s, doted on all three great-grandchildren, often riding over from the Circle O to spend time with them. Flynn and Zachary celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary in June of 1890 with a quiet dinner after the children were asleep, reflecting on the decade they had built together. "You remember that first day you watched me with Shadow?" Flynn asked, his hand covering hers on the table. "I remember everything about that time," Zachary said. "How scared I was to talk to you, how certain I was that you would never see me as anything but the cook." "I saw you from the beginning," Flynn said. "I saw how you watched the horses, how you understood them. I just needed time to work up the courage to tell you. We have come so far," Zachary marveled. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life." "Our life," Flynn corrected with a smile. "Everything I have accomplished, it is because we did it together." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity mixed with the passion that had never faded between them. Afterward, lying in Flynn's arms, Zachary felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. She had everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever dared to dream. The ranch continued to thrive throughout the 1890s. Their three children grew up surrounded by horses and love, learning the family business from the ground up. Samuel, at 13, was already working with younger horses under Flynn's supervision. Rose, at 11, had a particular gift for the initial trust building, able to calm even the most anxious animals with her gentle presence. Henry, at 6, was still learning, but he showed promise. Shadow, now aging but still magnificent, remained Flynn's primary mount. The Stallion was in his late teens, his muzzle graying, but he still carried Flynn with pride and grace. He had sired several foals over the years, and his temperament had proven inheritable. His offspring were known for their intelligence and trainability, highly sought after by ranchers across the region. In the spring of 1895, tragedy struck when Thomas O'Brien passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78. Flynn grieved deeply for the grandfather who had raised him, who had believed in his dreams, who had given him the land to build his future. The funeral was attended by people from across 3 counties, testament to the respect Thomas had earned over his long life. After the burial, Flynn stood by his grandfather's grave, Zachary at his side. "He gave me everything," Flynn said, his voice rough with tears. "This ranch, my start, his belief in me when I had lost everything in Wyoming." "He was proud of you," Zachary said, squeezing his hand. "So proud of the man you became, the life you built." "We built," Flynn corrected, as he always did. He pulled her close. "I do not know how I would have survived this without you. You will never have to find out," Zachary promised. "I am here always." Thomas left the Circle O to Flynn in his will, with the provision that Flynn's cousin Joseph, who had been helping run the ranch, would manage the daily operations and share in the profits. Flynn was content with this arrangement, having no desire to give up the horse training ranch he and Zachary had built together. But it meant additional financial security, meant they could make improvements they had been putting off, meant they could relax slightly about the future. That summer, they built a new barn with an innovative design that allowed for better ventilation and more natural light. They constructed additional training rings and hired 2 more ranch hands. They also built a larger house, with proper bedrooms for each of the children and a spacious kitchen where Zachary could cook for their expanding household. But even with success and prosperity, they never forgot where they had started. They never turned away a horse in need, even if the owner could not pay their full fee. They took on apprentices who wanted to learn their methods, teaching the next generation a different way of working with animals. They gave back to the community that had supported them, donating horses to families in need, helping neighbors during hard times. Flynn and Zachary's love remained the foundation of everything they did. After 17 years of marriage, they were still each other's best friend, closest confidant, and greatest supporter. They still stole moments alone whenever they could, still sat on the porch after the children were asleep, still looked at each other with the same warmth that had bloomed during those early days watching Shadow's transformation. In 1897, Samuel, now 18, announced his intention to marry a girl from town, a sweet-natured young woman named Clara who loved horses almost as much as the O'Brien family did. Flynn and Zachary gave their blessing, and the wedding was held at the ranch that autumn, with the ceremony taking place near the creek where Flynn and Zachary's house had first stood. Watching their eldest son exchange vows, Zachary felt the passage of time acutely. It seemed impossible that the tiny baby she had held in her arms was now a man starting his own life. But she was proud beyond measure of who Samuel had become, a young man of integrity and skill who shared his parents' values. "We are getting old," she whispered to Flynn as they danced at the reception. Flynn laughed. "Speak for yourself. I am in my prime." But he was 44 now, his dark hair streaked with silver, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. And Zachary was 41, her own hair showing threads of gray. They were no longer the young couple who had fallen in love over a wild stallion. They were partners who had built a life together, who had weathered challenges and celebrated triumphs, who had raised children and created something lasting. "I love you," Zachary said. "Just as much now as that first day on the porch when you told me you wanted to build a future together." "More," Flynn said. "I love you more with every year that passes, with every challenge we overcome together, with every moment we share." They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by family and friends, their children laughing nearby, their life spread out around them like a tapestry woven from hard work and devotion and love. Rose, at 15, was beginning to receive attention from young men in the area, though she seemed more interested in horses than romance. She had her mother's steel core beneath a gentle exterior, and had already declared her intention to run the family business when Flynn and Zachary were ready to step back. Henry, at 12, was quieter than his siblings but showed a deep emotional intelligence that served him well with troubled horses. He could sense when an animal was frightened or in pain, often alerting Flynn or Zachary to issues before they became serious. The new century arrived with celebration across the nation, but for Flynn and Zachary, the turn of 1900 was just another year of the life they loved. They were established now, their methods proven, their ranch successful beyond their early dreams. But success had not changed who they were at their core. One morning in the spring of 1900, Flynn was working with a particularly stubborn gelding in the training ring when he felt a sharp pain in his chest. He pushed through it, finishing the session, but Zachary noticed immediately that something was wrong. "What is it?" she demanded, her hand on his arm. "Nothing, just a bit winded," Flynn said, but his face was pale. Zachary insisted he see the doctor in town, and her insistence probably saved his life. The doctor diagnosed a heart condition, nothing immediately life-threatening but serious enough to require changes. Flynn needed to reduce his physical labor, avoid stress, take better care of himself. The diagnosis terrified Zachary. The thought of losing Flynn, of facing life without her partner, was unbearable. But Flynn, ever practical, simply adjusted. He took on more of the business and consulting work, letting Samuel and the hired hands do the more physically demanding training. He focused on the initial assessment of new horses, using his years of experience to develop training plans that others would implement. It was not easy for him to step back from the hands-on work he loved, but he did it because Zachary asked him to, because he wanted to be there for their family for as many years as possible. And he discovered that he enjoyed the consulting work, found satisfaction in teaching others his methods, in seeing his philosophy spread beyond their ranch. Zachary, in turn, took on more of the direct training work. At 43, she was in her prime as a horsewoman, her skills honed by over 20 years of experience. She could gentle a horse as well as Flynn ever had, could read equine body language like a written language. Owners sometimes requested her specifically, word having spread that Mrs. O'Brien had a magic touch with traumatized mares. Shadow finally passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1901, at the remarkable age of 25. Flynn grieved for the horse that had been with him through so much, the animal whose gentling had led him to Zachary, whose transformation had established their reputation. They buried Shadow on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple marker that read, "Shadow, faithful friend and teacher. 1876–1901. I owe him everything," Flynn said at the graveside, Zachary holding his hand. "If not for him, I might never have had the courage to speak to you, might never have developed the methods that became our life's work." "He was special," Zachary agreed. "He taught us both so much about trust and patience." They stood together on that hill, watching the sun set over the ranch they had built, the life they had created. Despite the sadness of Shadow's passing, Zachary felt blessed. She had loved and been loved, had found her purpose, had raised 3 remarkable children with a man who valued her as an equal partner. Samuel and Clara welcomed their first child, a daughter, in 1902, making Flynn and Zachary grandparents. Holding that tiny girl, Zachary felt the circle of life turning, felt the connection between generations. This child would grow up on the ranch just as her father had, would learn to love horses and the land, would carry forward the values Flynn and Zachary had worked so hard to instill. Rose, at 20, finally fell in love with a young veterinarian who had come to the area and was immediately fascinated by the O'Brien training methods. David was a kind young man who treated animals with the same respect Flynn and Zachary did, and they welcomed him into the family with open arms when he and Rose married in 1903. Henry, at 17, showed no interest in marriage yet, but was becoming an invaluable part of the ranch operations. He had taken over most of the initial work with new horses, proving to have an almost uncanny ability to understand what each animal needed. Flynn's health remained stable through careful management. He had slowed down, no longer worked the dawn to dusk schedule of earlier years, but he was still very much involved in the ranch. He and Zachary had more time together now, long walks along the creek, quiet evenings reading together, trips into town for social occasions. On their 25th wedding anniversary in June of 1903, Flynn arranged for the children to watch the ranch so he could take Zachary on a trip to Chicago. It was the first time either of them had been to a major city, and they marveled at the towering buildings, the rush of people, the modern conveniences. But after a week, they were both ready to return home to their ranch, to the wide open spaces and the horses they loved. "I suppose we are country people to our bones," Zachary said on the train ride back. "Nothing wrong with that," Flynn said, his arm around her shoulders. "We have a good life, Zachary, a very good life." "The best life," she agreed. "I would not change a single thing." Well, that was not entirely true. She wished Flynn's heart was stronger, wished they could have more years guaranteed together. But she had learned not to take time for granted, to treasure each day they had. Back at the ranch, they settled back into their routines, but with the ease of people who had earned their rest. They still worked, still trained horses, still maintained their reputation for excellence. But they also took time to enjoy the fruits of their labor, to play with their grandchildren, to simply be together. In 1905, tragedy struck when a fire swept through one of the barns. Thanks to the quick action of the ranch hands, all the horses were saved and no one was hurt, but the structure was destroyed. Flynn wanted to immediately start rebuilding, but the stress triggered another heart episode that landed him in bed for a week. Zachary, terrified of losing him, made a decision. "We are going to slow down," she told him firmly. "Not stop completely, but we are going to let the children take over more of the operations. You are 62 years old, Flynn O'Brien, and I intend to keep you around for many more years. But that means you have to take care of yourself." Flynn wanted to argue, but he saw the fear in her eyes and relented. "All right," he said. "We will step back together." They promoted Samuel to manager of the training operations, with Rose and David handling the business side and Henry overseeing the ranch hands. Flynn and Zachary moved into an advisory role, consulting on difficult cases, but no longer doing the day-to-day work. It was a difficult transition for both of them, giving up the hands-on control they had maintained for over 20 years. But it also brought unexpected gifts. They had time to travel a bit, visiting other horse ranches and sharing their methods. They had time for hobbies, with Flynn taking up woodworking and Zachary rediscovering her love of gardening. Most importantly, they had time for each other. They would sit for hours on the porch of their house, watching the ranch bustle with activity, satisfied that their children were carrying on their legacy. Samuel had the same patient touch with horses that his father did. Rose had her mother's business acumen and determination. Henry had a gift all his own, an almost mystical connection with troubled animals. "We did well," Flynn said one evening, his hand covering Zachary's where it rested on the arm of her chair. "We did," Zachary agreed. "We took a wild stallion and built an empire." Flynn laughed. "I would not call it an empire, but we built something good, something lasting. We showed people there was a better way." "More than that," Zachary said. "We built a family. We built a love that has lasted through everything. That is what I am most proud of." Flynn raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Zachary O'Brien. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And you are mine," she said, tears in her eyes. "My partner, my love, my home." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with laughter and energy. Samuel and Clara had 4 children total, Rose and David had 3, and even Henry eventually married and started a family. Flynn's health continued to be a concern, with occasional episodes that reminded them both of his mortality. But he was careful, and with Zachary watching over him like a hawk, he managed to remain relatively stable. In 1910, a journalist from a national magazine came to interview them about their training methods. The resulting article, complete with photographs of the ranch and the family, brought them brief fame. They received letters from across the country, from people who wanted to learn their techniques, from owners of troubled horses seeking help. But Flynn and Zachary were content to let their children handle the increased business. They had worked hard for over 30 years and had earned their peaceful retirement. They still consulted on special cases, still offered advice and guidance, but the daily operations belonged to the next generation now. On a warm day in May of 1912, Flynn and Zachary celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary with a family gathering at the ranch. Their 3 children were there with spouses, and a total of 11 grandchildren ranging in age from infant to 13. The house was chaos and noise and love, exactly as it should be. As the sun set and the younger grandchildren were put to bed, Flynn and Zachary slipped away to their favorite spot, the hill where Shadow was buried. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge, holding hands as they had done for over 3 decades. "You remember that first night we sat together on the porch?" Flynn asked. "When I told you I wanted to build a future with you." "Of course," Zachary said. "I was terrified and thrilled and so in love I could barely think straight." "I knew that night that I was going to marry you," Flynn said. "I knew you were my destiny, my missing piece." "We have had a good run, have we not?" Zachary said, her voice catching slightly. Flynn heard the worry in her tone and squeezed her hand. "We are not done yet," he said firmly. "I plan to stick around and drive you crazy for many more years." Zachary laughed through her tears. "You better. I am not finished with you yet, Flynn O'Brien." They sat until the moon rose. 2 people who had found each other against the odds, who had built a life together through work and love and unwavering partnership. The ranch spread out below them, lights from the houses twinkling in the darkness, testimony to everything they had created. Flynn's health took a downturn in the winter of 1913. A bad case of influenza weakened his already compromised heart, and for a terrifying week, Zachary thought she might lose him. But Flynn was stubborn and strong-willed, and he fought his way back from the brink. By spring, he was recovered, though frailer than before. "I am not ready to leave you," he told Zachary as he convalesced. "We still have things to do, years to share." "Then you better keep fighting," Zachary said, trying to sound stern though her eyes were wet. "Because I am not ready to let you go." Flynn did recover, though it was clear that he had aged significantly. At 69, he moved more slowly, tired more easily, had to be careful not to overexert himself. But his mind was still sharp, his love for Zachary still the center of his world. They celebrated his 70th birthday in August of 1913 with a huge party at the ranch. People came from across the state, former clients, friends, fellow ranchers, all wanting to honor the man who had changed how so many people thought about horse training. There were speeches and gifts and far too much food, but the best moment came at the end of the night, when everyone had gone home and Flynn and Zachary were alone in their bedroom. 70 years old, Flynn marveled. "I never imagined I would live so long." "You have to make it to 80 at least," Zachary said. "I have already planned the party." Flynn pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "As long as I have you, I will keep fighting to stay here." They made love that night, gentle and slow and filled with tenderness. Afterward, Zachary lay with her head on Flynn's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, that sound that had become more precious than anything else in the world. The next few years were peaceful. Flynn's health remained stable with careful management. Zachary, at 63, was still active and involved with the ranch, though she too had slowed down. They spent their days enjoying their grandchildren, offering advice when asked, but mostly just being together. In 1916, Samuel approached them with a proposal. The ranch had grown so successful that they needed to expand again, possibly purchase adjacent property. But it would require significant investment. Flynn and Zachary discussed it at length. They had always reinvested profits back into the ranch, but at their age, did they really want to take on the stress of major expansion in the end? They decided to let Samuel make the decision. "This is your ranch now," Flynn told his son. "Your mother and I built it, but you and your siblings are the ones running it, the ones who will carry it forward. We trust your judgment." It was a symbolic passing of the torch, an acknowledgement that the next generation was truly in charge, and it felt right. Flynn and Zachary had done their part. Now it was time to let their children forge their own path. They moved into a smaller cottage on the property, leaving the main house to Samuel and his growing family. The cottage was cozy and perfect for two people, with a view of the corrals and the creek. Zachary filled it with photographs of their life together, of their children and grandchildren, of the horses they had trained over the years. On quiet evenings, she and Flynn would look through old photographs, reminiscing about the early days, laughing over memories, marveling at how much they had accomplished together. "Do you have any regrets?" Flynn asked her one night. Zachary thought about it seriously. "No," she said finally. "There were hard times, scary times, moments when I was not sure how we would make it through. But I would not change anything because it all led to this, to us, to the life we built. Not even Shadow throwing all those ranch hands," Flynn teased. Zachary laughed. "Especially not that. If Shadow had not been impossible, you might never have asked me to watch and learn with you. We might never have gotten to know each other." "Then I am grateful to that stubborn horse," Flynn said. "He brought me everything I needed." As 1918 dawned, Flynn's health began to decline again. He was 74 now, and his heart was simply wearing out. The doctor was honest with them. There was nothing more to be done except make him comfortable and treasure the time they had left. Zachary refused to accept it at first, raged against the unfairness of losing the man she had loved for 40 years. But Flynn was calm, at peace with what was coming. "I have had a wonderful life," he told her as they sat together in their cottage. "I have loved and been loved. I have done work that mattered. I have raised 3 remarkable children and met 11 extraordinary grandchildren. I have spent 40 years with the most amazing woman I have ever known. How can I complain about that?" "By not leaving me," Zachary said, crying. "By fighting to stay here." "I will fight as long as I can," Flynn promised. "But Zachary, when the time comes, you have to let me go. You have to keep living, keep loving, keep sharing your gift with the world." "I do not know how to live without you," Zachary whispered. Flynn pulled her close, his arms still strong enough to hold her. "You are the strongest person I know. You will find a way, and I will be watching over you, waiting until we can be together again." Through the spring and summer of 1918, Flynn slowly faded. He spent his days in bed or sitting in a chair on the porch, watching the ranch he had built continue without him. The family gathered often, children and grandchildren coming to spend time with him, to say the things that needed to be said while there was still time. Zachary barely left his side. She read to him, talked to him about their life together, held his hand through the long nights. The children tried to get her to rest, to take care of herself, but she refused. These were her last days with the man she loved, and she would not waste a single moment. On a warm evening in September, with Zachary holding his hand, and their children gathered around the bed, Flynn O'Brien slipped peacefully away. His last words were, "I love you, Zachary. Always have, always will." The funeral was held on a beautiful autumn day, with what seemed like half the state in attendance. Flynn was buried on the hill next to Shadow, the horse that had started everything. The marker read, "Flynn O'Brien, 1843–1918. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he showed us a better way." In the days and weeks after Flynn's death, Zachary moved through life in a haze of grief. Nothing felt real without him. The cottage was too empty, too quiet. She would wake in the night reaching for him, her heart breaking anew when she remembered he was gone. But she had made him a promise to keep living, and she was determined to honor that. Slowly, painfully, she began to find her way forward. She spent time with her grandchildren, letting their energy and joy remind her that life continued. She worked with the horses, finding solace in their uncomplicated affection, and she talked to Flynn, sitting on the hill by his grave, telling him about her days, about the ranch, about how much she missed him. Sometimes she swore she could feel his presence, a warmth in the air, a sense of peace. 6 months after Flynn's death, a rancher brought in a traumatized mare, badly abused and nearly feral. Samuel was going to turn it away, thinking it was too much for the ranch to handle in their grief, but Zachary stepped in. "We will take her," she said firmly. "This is what we do. What Flynn and I built this ranch to do." She worked with the mare herself, using all the techniques she and Flynn had developed over 40 years. It was hard, demanding work for a woman of 65, but it was also healing. As she helped the mare learn to trust again, she felt her own broken heart begin to mend. The mare's transformation took months, but eventually she became gentle and rideable. When the rancher came to collect her, he was amazed at the change. "I thought she was hopeless," he said. "But you saved her." "My husband and I always believed no horse was hopeless," Zachary said. "I am just carrying on what we started together." Life continued. Zachary lived another 12 years, staying active and involved with the ranch until her final days. She saw her grandchildren grow up and start families of their own, saw the ranch expand and prosper, saw Flynn's methods spread across the West and beyond. She never remarried, never even considered it. Flynn had been her great love, her partner, her other half. No one could replace him, and she did not want anyone to try. On a spring morning in 1930, Zachary passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 77. She was buried next to Flynn on the hill, her marker reading, "Zachary O'Brien, 1853–1930. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, she taught us to trust." The O'Brien Horse Training Ranch continued to operate successfully for generations, the methods Flynn and Zachary had pioneered becoming standard practice. Their great-great-grandchildren still run the ranch today, still using the patient, respectful techniques that started with a wild black stallion and a cowboy who chose understanding over force. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the wind blows across the hill where Flynn and Zachary rest beside Shadow, ranch hands swear they can feel a presence, a sense of enduring love that transcends death. The story of the stallion that had thrown every hand on the ranch, of the cowboy who let a young woman watch and learn, of the love that grew between them, became legend in those parts. It was a reminder that the strongest bonds are forged not through dominance but through partnership, not through breaking but through understanding, not through force but through love. Flynn and Zachary had proven that with horses and with each other, and their legacy lived on in every gentle touch, every patient session, every moment of trust built between human and animal. Their story had started with a wild horse and 2 people brave enough to try a different way. It had grown into a life rich with love and purpose, with children and grandchildren, with success measured not in wealth, but in lives touched and animals saved. And it had ended, as all great love stories do, with 2 souls who had found each other, loved each other, and built something beautiful together that would outlast them both. The ranch still stands, the methods still work, and somewhere on that hill, Flynn and Zachary rest together, their journey complete, their love eternal, their story a testament to the power of patience, understanding, and choosing compassion over cruelty in all things.